And I'm no expert on the Australian medical teaching system, but so far, just based on the finances and the total hours of work, this seems like a big. Dr. Freya, my salary as a junior doctor in Australia, pay slip revealed.
I thought I'd go through my payslip today and be super transparent about exactly how much I earn as a resident doctor in Australia.
Off to a strong start. Thank you for being transparent about resident doctor, junior doctor in the title. That's refreshing.
So let's get my pay slip up. So this was my pay slip a couple of weeks ago, and it's a super standard pay slip for the job that I'm doing at the moment. So the pay details are my ordinary hours, an afternoon shift loading rate, and some on-calls, training time, and some continuing medical education allowance.
So it looks like they are categorizing her hours based on the type of work she's doing, and it is hourly versus what we're used to here in the US is salary. Now, I'm wondering if across all of Australia it's like that. I'm guessing so. In the US, you get a fixed salary, and it doesn't matter if you're in a family medicine residency and you're working 50 hours a week, or if you're in neurosurgery residency and you're doing 100 hours a week. You get paid a salary regardless of how many hours you're putting in week to week.
My ordinary hours, kind of the base pay that I get for working 76 hours in a fortnight or 38 hours in a week, is $66.50 essentially per hour.
Yo, I mean, for someone who's not a consultant, that's not bad. $66 per hour, if you equate that to a 40-hour work week across 50 weeks in a year, that comes out to $132,000 per year just based on the hourly rate alone. But in this instance, it would be higher than that because she's getting paid hourly. And if she puts in more than 40 hours per week, which tends to be typical, then she'd be making more than that estimate I just gave you.
So from that, I got just over $5,000 in a fortnight. And then I did one afternoon shift out of that kind of 76 hours, and you get paid like a bit of extra money if you do an afternoon shift. So I got an extra $62. So it was a 5-hour shift. So yeah, whatever that is, $10 more an hour when I do an evening.
It gets better and better. You get paid more based on the type of work you're doing. So 66 is the floor.
I was on call 3 times, so I was standby on call. So that basically means that if someone calls in sick to the evening, if I'm evening standby on call, or the night shift, if I'm night shift standby on call, I have to come into the hospital and cover them, or stay on from my shift and cover them. And that is my least favorite thing about being a doctor, being standby on call. I hate it. It's stressful. And then if you get called in, particularly for a night shift after you've worked part of a day, yeah, terrible.
Yeah, that's part of training is you don't have much control over your schedule and you will be placed on call occasionally. Generally speaking, for obvious reasons, if your schedule is more predictable, it's a lot easier to manage. When it's unpredictable and you don't know whether or not you're working that night or whether or not you're sleeping that night, things are a lot more challenging. Also depends on what service you're on when you're doing call. So let's say you're in residency and you're past your PGY1. So now you're focusing on just your core specialty. And let's say your core specialty is dermatology. Guess what? When you're on dermatology call, not really a big deal. I remember when I was rotating at an away rotation, we had a patient come in and we were thinking it was either possibly SJS or TENS. That's Steven-Johnson syndrome or toxic epidermal necrolysis syndrome. And I was on call for plastic. So I got in, I guess, the night before. And then we paged the dermatologist that was on call. And this must have been like 3 a.m. They didn't come in until like 8, dude. They clearly, well, yeah, this. So, dermatology call, first of all, that person should have come in. They should not have come in 5 hours later. But you have very few emergencies in dermatology, whereas you're going to have way more emergencies in neurosurgery.
Anyway, so for that, I got $71.50 essentially for each of the on-calls I did. So just over $200. Then training. So as a registrar in Australia, I get 10 hours of training time, which in theory is an hour a day of teaching on average, in theory. And then registrar CME, we just get an extra $237 a fortnight. If we think about my ordinary hours as 86 hours a fortnight, so my 76 ordinary and then my 10 hours of teaching. So they're the things that I'll get paid even if I'm on annual leave, I'll still get paid that base rate. When you add that together and then times it by 26 for 26 fortnights in a year, it takes me to $148,708.56.
I just realized this is all Australian dollars. So she did the conversion here, 148,000 Australian dollars, which I'm like, damn, that's fantastic for a trainee. It's 96,000 US dollars. which is still not bad. That's a lot better than the average here in the US, which is 66,000 per year across, you average every single year of training from the earliest PGY1 to like PGY7. It averages all out to about 66K. Residents here are definitely working a lot more than 86 hours every 2 weeks. They're working like 86 hours every week. Again, depends on your specialty. So in reality, not necessarily. And I'm no expert on the Australian medical teaching system, but so far, just based on the finances and the total hours worked, this seems like a big step in the right direction compared to at least what we're doing here in the US, and also compared to what's happening in the UK.
So now let's go to the deductions. So we have salary packaging. So it's basically healthcare. I'm pretty sure all healthcare workers, I know the nurses definitely do, but we can get $10,000 extra out of our pay over a year. Actually, it's a bit more than 10,000 because it's about 10,000 for living expenses, which goes towards my mortgage.
It's starting to make a lot more sense why I see a lot of doctors, like especially from the UK and some other countries, going to Australia and practicing as junior doctors for a long time without feeling the need to necessarily specialize and become consultants, because they can make a decent living even as junior doctors. But again, that's just my rudimentary understanding. I feel like someone who is more in the know will tell me why that is naive or a misunderstanding. And please do leave a comment to inform all of us.
It's about 2,000 across the year that you can put on a meals and entertainment card or get reimbursed for dinners out and things like that. It's quite cool. And it ends up being about $582 a fortnight. So that gets taken out and then it gets kind of given back to me after I pay tax on the rest of it.
So that's what, $1,000 a month, $12,000 a year?
And then the admin fees for that are $16 a fortnight.
Yeah, a lot of these tax deductions in the US, you generally are needing to run a business or be employed as a 1099 contractor rather than a W-2 employee in order to take these deductions, like the meals and entertainment as an example. You're not doing that when you're a resident. Some residency programs in higher cost of living cities, especially where there are resident unions, they will have like housing stipends and such, which are added on top of your regular salary. But that's still not quite the same as giving these tax deductions to things like meals and entertainment that are related to your work.
So my net pay, once you take out my tax and then you add back in my salary packaging amount, is $4,735.83 a fortnight. So if you times that by 26 again to get my annual take-home income in Australian dollars, it's 107,982 cents, or just over 70,000 US dollars, or just over 50,000 British pounds.
But remember, normally when we talk about salaries, we talk about salaries pre-tax, not post-tax. So now when you guys are seeing the 70K, keep in mind that is the post-tax. In the US, if you're getting paid 66 pre-tax, you're taking a lot less as post-tax. So it's always very important that you're comparing like with like. Don't compare a pre-tax to a post-tax and vice versa.
I didn't do overtime, I didn't do night shifts, I didn't do a weekend shift and things like that. So this is pretty much my minimum pay that I'll get for a fortnight. So if I work the weekends or I get called in for a night shift when I'm standby on call, I would get a lot more than this.
That's wild. I still can't believe that they get paid hourly. When you're working more hours in the hospital or you have to work nights or holidays, you get paid extra. What a revolutionary concept that is happening with medical trainees in Australia and is also happening in just about every other industry in America. My girlfriend's a nurse. She gets extra pay based on all these various factors, holidays and yada, yada, yada. Overnight stuff is a different multiple and whatever. She gets paid more for working overnight versus daytime shifts. But when you're in residency in the US, it's just like, here's your salary, work your ass off. And if you're in something surgical, so I was in plastic surgery, but neurosurgery is even worse in terms of the number of hours worked. They're regularly pushing and violating the 80-hour work week restriction, which is to say that over a month, you can't have your residents average more than 80 hours of work per week. But the neurosurgery residencies are like, yeah, residents, you got to lie about that and like deflate your hours so that we don't get put on probation. For me, I was around 80 hours per week. There were some weeks where you're going over, some weeks where you're going under, and it averages out around 80. And if you're in something that is not surgical, you're much more likely to be far below that. However, if you're on internal medicine, right, and you're rotating on ICU, that will be more challenging. That will be closer to the 80 hours. Whereas if you're doing clinic, outpatient, or just hospital floor, then your internal medicine hours will be less than when you're at ICU. So again, it's highly variable. But the funny thing to me, the sad thing rather, is that you get paid the same no matter how hard you're working, no matter how many hours, and no matter which days you're working, whether it's Christmas or New Year's or Thanksgiving, whether it's daytime, nighttime, you just get paid a flat salary in the US.
So I've got friends that work as unaccredited surge reggers and they make up to $10,000 pre-tax.
So surge regs, I believe, would be a surgery registrar, which is essentially like a surgery resident. Junior doctor is your first 2 years before you start specializing. Holy crap, dude. 10,000 Australian dollars per month. Because when you're working harder in surgery, you're putting more hours, more brutal hours, and you get compensated for that. What a radical idea.
Their rosters and their on-calls are awful, but I guess we get reimbursed for it, which it sounds like overseas a lot of people don't.
It's just a flat salary. That's really just still struggling to wrap my head around how fucked we are in the US on that front. I mean, I say that, but once you graduate as an attending, the compensation here is better than anywhere else in the world, really. So, I mean, that's why people put up with it, right? Because, okay, you're going to suffer for 3 to 7 years, depending on your specialty, and maybe a couple years more than that if you choose to do a fellowship, which pays a little bit more than residency, but not by much. And then when you're an attending, you're making way more than you do in Australia or in the UK or really any other country as an attending physician, a fully trained physician. I actually have a buddy here in Vegas who's an ED doc, and he told me he pulled in $1 million last year because he was just working his face off. And he's like, "Hey, I'm young. I'm in my early 30s. Me and my wife don't have kids yet. I want to build a little nest egg, so I'm just taking up a lot of shifts. I'm working harder than I probably want to when I get older. But as a 1099, working more than the average number of shifts, but still, I mean, I was asking him about it. It didn't seem terrible, other than again the circadian rhythm shifting that you have to do in EM. That's the more painful part than the total hours. But yeah, pulled in $1 million US dollars last year, right?
And I should clarify that in Australia, all junior doctors, depending on what state you're in, regardless of specialty, will get paid the same amount. So in Victoria, I get paid as a pediatric trainee the same amount per hour that a surgical trainee does or that a psychiatry trainee does in the hospital system.
Same thing in the US. So when you are a trainee, a resident, regardless of your specialty, you're getting paid the same amount. It's just based on the hospital. So every resident who is at UCSF is getting paid the same regardless of their specialty and regardless of how many hours they're putting in.
Difference in pay is purely about your roster and how many hours you work. Then when you're a consultant, you can work privately and charge whatever you want. And then that's when you get some discrepancies. Now I'm getting paid $66 an hour as my base pay as a PGY7, so 7 years out of med school doctor.
Oh, so she's not a junior doctor. Her title says junior doctor, probably for the YouTube algorithm and search and such. But she is now a registrar then.
When I started working as an intern or an F1 or a PGY1, I earned $27 an hour. So that was actually less than what I earned when I was working in a bottle shop on the weekends to get myself through uni. That was back in Tassie, and they've since advocated for pay increases on par or actually a little bit over the Victorian rates. So now we get paid less in Victoria than they do in Tassie. It used to be the other way around. But my income's gone up. It went up quite a lot when I moved from Tassie to Victoria, and then it's got up a little bit each year since then. Some years it's a couple of dollars an hour. I think one year there was a big jump of $10 an hour or something. But yeah, it's steadily increasing, and it will increase for the next like 2 or 3 years. And then I hit my cap of what I can earn as a trainee. And then the next time it'll go up would be when I become a consultant.
So in the US, it's similar in that each PGY year, you're paid a fixed salary. Again, we're not doing hourly rates. We're doing a fixed salary, but that fixed salary does increase. So when you start off as a PGY1, it's probably something like 60, 60, 62, something like that. And then every year after that, so from PGY1 intern year to PGY2, your second year of residency, you make an extra, let's say $2,500 per year, something like that. And it's not exactly that, but $2,000 to $3,000 per year are added to your salary with every additional year of training that you complete.
All right, so how much it cost to get me to earning this $66 an hour? And that's about 150,000 Australian dollars, including my medical school, which was about $80,000, which is as little as you can pretty much get away with paying for med school in Australia. And it's probably way less than what even the minimum is now because it was so long ago.
So that's 51,000 US dollars, which is a lot cheaper than in the US. But again, like when you zoom out and you look at the other factors, she said it's cheaper than what you would normally pay in Australia now. And yes, they are making much more when they are in residency, when they're in training still. But when you graduate and become a consultant or attending, then you're going to make a lot less in Australia. So it's trade-offs.
So I worked out at my current hourly rate of $66 an hour, I would need to work 2,272 hours to earn that money back. And that's an entire year of full-time work pre-tax.
Just 1 year though, it's not too bad to cover all your training.
For a postgrad year 7 trainee doctor in the UK, you could expect to earn maybe £60,000. I think that's right. And in the US, it seems to be an average of about $80,000 US dollars.
It's going to range a bit. Some are going to be lower than that, 75. Some are going to be higher than that, 85, 90. But that sounds about right.
My base pay pre-tax is 150,000 Australian dollars, which is 97 USD and 71 British pounds. So quite a bit higher in Australia. I will point out that I think residency training in the US seems a bit more intense, but it's much shorter than what it tends to be in Australia. And I think that's sort of similar to the UK, like the Australian process. So maybe PGY 7 in the US, a doctor's likely to be a consultant and earning quite a bit more.
Well, it depends on the specialty. So like if you're going into internal medicine, it's only 3 years after medical school. Whereas if you're doing neurosurgery, it's 7 years. But then if you want to be a cardiologist, you have to do your 3 years of internal medicine and then a 3-year cardiology fellowship or a 3-year gastroenterology fellowship. So also different types of surgical subspecialties. Some have integrated paths, like I was doing plastics, where you just do 6 years in plastics, but you can also do the independent path, where you do 5 years of general surgery and then 3 years of plastic surgery after that for a total of 8 years. So it really depends on the specialty and the route you're doing within that specialty.
Consultant pay in Australia in public hospitals, it starts from about $110 to $130 an hour, and it can go up to $200 to $220 an hour, depending on your experience and whether you work in private at all. And
Not bad, but still quite a bit lower than in the US. The average physician here makes about $360,000 US per year. Some will be lower than that, primary care, pediatrics, etc. Specialists, especially procedural and surgical, will make more than that. But if you were to convert that into an hourly rate, it would be higher than what she's showing here.
so really, as a fully fledged consultant, you can earn anywhere, if you're working full time, from $200,000 a year to $400,000 a year. And if you work privately, you can set your own rates.
Not bad, still lower than the US, but I mean, it is hourly. So if you wanted to make more than the top end of 260 US dollars, then you can put in more hours like my buddy in emergency medicine. If you want to know more about the finances for medical trainees, check out this video right here.